private jet landed on the runway with a soft sigh, like it was tired too. He was definitely tired. 11 weeks is a long time, even in fancy hotels that feel like no place at all. The deal was done, the papers were signed, and another pile of money so big it was just a number now had been added to his name. But as the car sped through the night, taking him from the airport to his house, he didn't feel like a billionaire. He just felt like a dad who had been gone for too long. He told his driver not to call ahead. He didn't want the big lights turned on or the staff lined up at the door. He didn't want a special meal prepared. He just wanted the normal thing, the messy, loud, beautiful normal thing of home. He wanted to walk in and maybe step on a stray toy. He wanted to hear the shouts and laughs of his 7-year-old triplets echoing down the hall. He missed their chaos. It was the one thing all his money couldn't buy on demand. The car turned onto the long driveway. The house stood at the end, huge and beautiful, with windows glowing like warm gold in the dark. It looked perfect, but as he got closer, a little knot started to form in his stomach. It was too quiet. Where was the noise? The big nanny he hired, the one with the strict schedule and the university degree in child development, she usually had them in bed by now, but there was usually some kind of sound. A protest, a final giggle, something. He pushed the heavy front door open. The grand foyer was empty and silent. A single lamp was on in the living room, painting long shadows. "Hello?" he called out, his voice feeling too loud in the quiet. No answer. The knot tightened. This was wrong. Were they even here? His mind, always racing to the worst-case scenario in business, started to do the same now. He walked further into the house, his expensive shoes silent on the thick rug. Then he heard it. It wasn't the sound he expected. It wasn't cartoons or video games. It was a gentle, rhythmic sound. Clap, 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 clap. And then a voice, low and warm, singing words he couldn't quite make out. It was a melody that felt old and sweet. He followed the sound, his worry mixing with confusion. He stopped at the doorway to the den, the room where all the expensive, educational toys were kept. The sight made him freeze, his breath catching in his chest. His 3 children were sitting in a little circle on the floor, their backs to him. They were in their matching blue pajamas. And kneeling in front of them was the maid, the quiet woman who cleaned the rooms and kept to herself. She had been with them for a few months, maybe. He barely knew her name. But here she was not cleaning. Her back was straight, and her hands were moving in a gentle, complicated clapping game with his son. She clapped her own hands, then clapped them against the boy's small palms, then together again, all in time with her soft singing. His son's face, in profile, was lit up with pure concentration and delight. She then turned to the next child, repeating the pattern, guiding their small hands patiently. The third child, his little girl, was watching the maid's face as if she was magic, her own hands moving carefully to copy the rhythm. He stood there, invisible in the doorway, and watched. He saw his usually wild son try hard and then erupt in a giggle when he messed up. Instead of a scolding, the maid laughed with him, a real, warm laugh that filled the quiet room. "Again, little one," she said, her accent soft. "Listen to the song in your hands." And his serious daughter, who often seemed lost in her own thoughts, was completely there, connected. A small smile on her face as her hands met the maid's perfectly, and that moment, something heavy settled in his heart. This wasn't what he paid for. He paid for structure, for lessons, for supervision. He had hired the head nanny for her perfect resume. But this was different. This was connection. This was a kind of simple, patient joy that no schedule could create. He had been gone for 77 days, and in this silent house, the only real life, the only real noise, was happening right here on this floor, with a woman he'd hardly noticed, teaching his children a silly, beautiful clapping game from her own childhood. He didn't move, afraid to break the spell, realizing with a sudden, painful clarity exactly what he had been missing. The world in that doorway shrank down to just that room. The silence of the big house, the long flight, the billions of dollars in deals. All of it just fell away. For a few long seconds, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a man watching a secret, perfect moment he was never supposed to see. He watched the maid's hands. They weren't the soft, manicured hands of the people he usually did business with. They were hands that worked, but they moved with such a gentle grace, meeting the small, frantic hands of his children with a patience that seemed endless. Her voice, singing that little song in Spanish, was like a lullaby and a game all at once. It wasn't coming from a speaker or a screen. It was coming from her, a real person, filling the quiet space between his children. His little girl, who sometimes seemed so quiet and inside herself at dinner, was leaning forward. Her eyes were locked on the maid's face, following every movement, her tongue poking out a little in concentration. When she got the clapping sequence right, a smile broke out on her face. Not the big, loud grin she gave for a new toy, but a small, proud, real smile. It was a smile he hadn't seen in weeks. His middle son, the one who was always bouncing off the walls, was sitting perfectly still. His whole body was focused on getting his hands to move the right way. And when he fumbled, he didn't get angry or frustrated like he usually did. He just giggled, a pure, bubbly sound. The maid giggled with him. "You almost had it," she whispered. "The song tricks you. Ready to try and catch it." His oldest, by 1 minute, was nodding seriously, already holding his hands up again, determined to master it. This was what he had been missing. Not just the presence of his children, but the peace inside the chaos. The feeling that they were seen, not just managed. He paid the head nanny a small fortune to make sure they did their homework, ate their vegetables, and went to bed on time. And she did. The house was always in order. But it was a quiet, sterile order. Felt more like a very nice hotel than a home. This felt like a home. It was messy in the best way. It was just a clapping game, probably one she learned from her own mother or grandmother. It didn't cost anything. It didn't need batteries or an instruction manual. It just needed a person willing to sit on the floor and be there. A wave of guilt, hot and sharp, washed over him. How many of these moments had he missed? How many times had he been on the other side of the world, convincing himself he was building a future for them, while the real moments of their present were happening without him? He thought providing this giant house, this safe life, was the ultimate gift. But watching this, he wondered if the greatest gift was just this simple, patient attention. He must have shifted his weight, or maybe let out a long, slow breath he didn't know he was holding, because the maid's head turned. Her eyes, which had been so warm and bright, met his from across the room. The change was instant. The song died in her throat. Her hands froze in mid-air. The warmth drained from her face, replaced by a look of pure, cold fear. It was the look of someone who knew they were in a place they shouldn't be, doing something they might get in terrible trouble for. She scrambled to her feet so fast it startled the children. She smoothed down her simple uniform dress, her hands now trembling. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice tight and formal, all the softness gone. "I am so sorry, sir. I did not know you were coming home." The triplets turned now, their little circle broken. "Daddy!" They yelled in unison, their voices loud in the quiet. They jumped up and ran to him, wrapping their arms around his legs. But even as he hugged them back, his eyes were still on her face. Her panic was so clear, so real. She thought she was going to lose her job. The magic of the moment was broken. The real world, with all its rules and roles, came crashing back into the quiet den. And he was left standing there, holding his children, with the truth of what he had just witnessed hanging in the air between him and the frightened woman who had given his kids a piece of real joy. The word sorry hung in the air, felt so wrong to him now. He was the one who should be sorry. Sorry for not being here. Sorry for walking into this moment and turning it into something she felt she needed to apologize for. His children tugged at his pants, their voices tumbling over each other. "Daddy, look, Maria taught us a game. You have to do the claps with the song. She said she can teach us another one tomorrow." He kept one hand on his daughter's head, his eyes still on the maid. Maria. Her name was Maria. He had seen it on the staff paperwork, but he'd never really said it before. She looked like she was waiting for a judge to give a sentence. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, her shoulders stiff. He needed to say something. The silence was making it worse. "Where is Miss Gable?" he asked. His voice came out softer than he meant it to. He wasn't trying to sound angry, just confused. Maria's eyes flicked down for a second. "She had to leave, sir. A family emergency. She said it would be okay." The children had finished all their homework and their reading. They had eaten. She said they could have screen time until bed. He looked around the room. The huge television was dark. No tablets were in sight. "They don't look like they're on screens," he said. A little bit of her fear seemed to mix with something else. A tiny spark of pride, maybe, or just plain truth. "They were, sir, for a little while, but they became restless. They started arguing over the game. They seemed—" She searched for the word, lonely. That word, lonely, hit him right in the chest, in a place all the money in the world couldn't protect. "So," she continued, her words coming faster now, as if she needed to explain everything before he could stop her. "I finished cleaning the kitchen, and I asked if they wanted to learn a game my sisters and I used to play. I thought it would be quiet. I did not mean to overstep, Mr. Thorne. Truly." He looked at his 3 children, still buzzing with the energy of the game. They didn't look like they were with someone who had overstepped. They looked like they were with someone who had seen them, someone who saw restless and lonely and decided to do something about it. His oldest son tugged his hand. "Daddy, can she stay, please? Ms. Gable always says no to games. She says it's too loud." It was a simple statement from a 7-year-old, but it explained so much. The perfect, quiet order of the house wasn't for the children. It was for the adults. It was easier. He knelt down so he was on their level. Their 3 pairs of eyes, so bright and hopeful, looked back at him. "Did you have fun with Maria?" he asked them, though he already knew the answer. Their responses were a joyful explosion. "Yes, she knows the best games. And she let us help stir the soup. She said the noodles dance in the pot." He stood back up. Maria was watching him, that fearful look still in her eyes. He thought about the head nanny, Ms. Gable, with her perfect schedule and her strict rules. She was doing the job he had hired her to do. But was it the job his children needed? He took a slow breath. This wasn't about firing someone. This was about fixing something he had broken by his own absence. "Maria," he said. Her name felt strange in his mouth, but also right. "The children seem very happy and quiet. You said they helped you make dinner?" She nodded, still cautious. "Yes, sir. A simple soup." They each took a turn with the spoon. He looked around the peaceful den, then back at her. "Miss Gable may be gone for a while with her family emergency," he said. It wasn't a lie, he had no idea. But in that moment he made a decision. "I need someone I can trust with them. Someone they clearly enjoy." He paused, watching her face. The fear was slowly being replaced by confusion. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Your duties with the cleaning will be taken over by someone else. I want you here with them. Your only job will be to look after these 3. We will talk about what that means in the morning." For a second, she just stared. It wasn't a scolding. It wasn't dismissal. It was the last thing she expected. Her eyes darted to the children, then back to him, and they filled with a sudden sheen of tears. She quickly blinked them away, nodding. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I will take very good care of them." His youngest daughter grabbed Maria's hand and grinned up at her father. "Does this mean we can learn the other game tomorrow? The one with the faster song?" He finally smiled, a real one, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even known was there. "I think that sounds like a perfect plan," he said. The right person had been here all along. He just hadn't been home to see it. The morning sun through the big kitchen windows felt different. It wasn't just light. It felt warm, and it landed on a scene he hadn't seen in a long, long time. The table was a little messy. There was a splash of milk near a cereal bowl, and a few pieces of dry cereal were scattered on the wooden table like tiny, abandoned boats. His 3 children were there in their school uniforms, but they weren't just eating. They were chattering. His daughter was telling a story about a dream she had, her hands moving in the air. His two sons were debating, with their mouths full, about whether the red car or the blue car in their game was faster. It was normal kid noise, but it was music to him. Maria was moving between the counter and the table. She wasn't wearing her usual simple cleaning dress. She had on a soft, warm-looking sweater and plain pants. She looked more like a mother at home than a staff member in a uniform. She refilled a glass of juice without being asked, and as she passed his youngest, she gently tapped his shoulder. "Chew first, then talk, little man. The cars can wait." She said it with a smile in her voice. The boy grinned, a bit sheepish, and nodded, chewing exaggeratedly. He stood in the doorway, a cup of coffee in his hand, just watching. He had already spoken to Maria earlier, his words more formal than he felt. He explained she would now be the children's primary caregiver. He talked about hours and salary, about responsibilities. Her eyes had gone wide at the number he mentioned, which was much more than she made cleaning. She had just nodded, saying "Thank you, sir," over and over. But here, in the kitchen, he saw what he was really paying for. It wasn't for her to follow a schedule written on a fridge. It was for this feeling of a morning that wasn't a military operation, but a home. "All right, pirates," Maria said, clapping her hands once. 5 minutes. Bags, shoes, and did anyone feed the goldfish? There was a sudden scramble. "I forgot," shouted one of the boys, and he thundered out of the room toward the living room where the fishbowl was. She didn't yell. She didn't sigh. She just shook her head with a little laugh and started clearing the bowls. He remembers every score from every soccer game he's ever seen. But the fish, she muttered, more to herself than anyone. His daughter walked over to him, her backpack almost as big as she was. "Daddy, are you going to be here when we get home?" The question was a small, sharp knife. He looked over her head at Maria, who was listening while she wiped the table. He had a conference call at 3, but it could be moved. "Yes," he heard himself say. "I'll be here. Maybe we can all play that clapping game." His daughter's face lit up like he had just promised her a trip to the moon. She threw her arms around his legs in a quick, tight hug before running off to find her shoes. The house bustled for the next few minutes with the good kind of chaos. Finding a missing homework sheet, tying a shoelace, a debate over who got to sit by the window in the car. Maria handled it all with a calm, steady rhythm. She wasn't just managing them. She was flowing with them. Finally, they were all by the door, looking up at him. "Have a good day," he said, the words feeling more important than when he said them to his board of directors. "Bye, Daddy," they chorused. Maria shepherded them out the door. Just before she followed, she turned back. For a second, the formal mask slipped, and she just looked like a person who was happy. "Thank you, sir," she said again. But this time it meant something different. It wasn't for the job. It was for the trust. The door closed, and the house was quiet again. But the quiet felt different now. It didn't feel empty. It felt like the quiet after laughter, a good quiet, a quiet that was just resting until the life came back into it. That he walked back into the kitchen. The cereal was put away. The counter was clean. But on the table, right where his daughter had been sitting, was a small, clumsily drawn picture on a napkin. It had 3 stick figures holding hands with a bigger stick figure, and above them what looked like musical notes. He picked it up, a lump forming in his throat that he realized he had spent years building walls around his family. Walls of money, of safety, of hired help. He thought those walls were protecting them. But maybe they were just keeping him out. Maria hadn't climbed the walls. She had just walked right through them because for her it was never about the house or the money. It was about the 3 children sitting on the floor, needing someone to see them. For the first time in a very long time, he was looking forward to the end of the workday. He wasn't just coming home to a house. He was coming home to find out what happened next. The big, quiet office felt wrong that day. The view of the city from his tall window, which usually made him feel powerful, now just looked like a picture behind glass. He was distracted. During a very important meeting about company budgets, he found himself wondering what the kids had for lunch. Did Maria make the soup again? Did she let them help? He moved the 3 o'clock call. He told his assistant he was leaving early for a family matter. It was the truth, but the truth felt new and important. When his car pulled up the driveway in the middle of the afternoon, he heard the noise before he even opened the door. It wasn't arguing or crying. It was the thump of a ball and laughter, and three voices all talking at once. He followed the sound around the side of the house to the big, flat lawn. They were playing soccer, or a wild, messy version of it. The goal was 2 stacks of gardening pots. Maria was in goal, standing between the pots, her sweater tied around her waist. She was trying to block shots from all 3 kids at once, who were running around her, kicking the ball and squealing. "Hey, no fair. You're all against me," she yelled. But she was laughing, her hands up in the air as she jumped from side to side. His daughter kicked the ball. It rolled slowly toward the goal. Maria dove for it in a dramatic, silly way, landing on the grass with an oof as the ball rolled between the pots. All 3 children erupted in cheers, jumping up and down. "I scored. I beat you," his daughter shouted. Maria sat up, grass in her hair. "You got me. You are too fast for me," she said, holding her arms out for a hug. His daughter ran into them, giggling that he stood there, forgotten for a moment, watching this woman get grass stains on her pants for the sake of a goal scored by a 7-year-old. Ms. Gable would have never allowed this. She would have said it was too chaotic, too dirty, that someone could get hurt. But watching them, their faces flushed and happy under the sun, he knew this was exactly what they needed. This was living. His oldest son noticed him first. "Daddy, you're home. Watch this." He took the ball and tried to do a fancy trick, falling over his own feet instead. Everyone laughed, including the boy himself. Maria got to her feet, brushing off her pants. She smiled at him, a little out of breath. "Homework is all done, sir. I thought they needed some air." "It looks like they needed that," he said, and he meant it. Later, after the kids had washed up and were having a snack in the kitchen, he asked Maria to join him in his study. She followed him in, looking a little nervous again, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. He didn't sit behind his big desk. He sat in one of the chairs by the fireplace and motioned for her to take the other. "Please," he said. She sat on the very edge, her back straight. "I wanted to ask you," he began, searching for the right words. "The head nanny, Ms. Gable. She had a schedule. Music lessons on Monday, tutoring on Tuesday. Did that work?" Maria looked down at her hands, which were folded in her lap. She was quiet for a long moment. "The children are very smart, sir," she said carefully. "They learn quickly. But," she paused, choosing her words, "sometimes after the tutor left, your youngest would have a headache. Your middle one would get very quiet. It is a lot for small people to be told what to do and think all the time. The brain needs to run free sometimes, like on the lawn, like with the clapping game. It lets the worry out. It lets the worry out." The sentence hung in the quiet room. What worry did his 7-year-olds have? But then he thought of his own quiet house, his own absent father, and he knew. Worry didn't need a big reason. Loneliness was enough. "So," he said, his voice low, "what would you do if it were up to you?" She looked up then, her eyes meeting his. The nervousness was gone, replaced by a quiet certainty. "I would listen, sir. In the morning, I would ask, what should we do today? Maybe one wants to draw. Maybe one wants to read a story. Maybe one just wants to build a big pillow fort and sit inside it. The lessons are important, yes, but so is the quiet time. So is the play. They are children. That is their work, too." He nodded slowly. It was so simple. It wasn't a parenting philosophy from a book. It was just humanity, seeing them as people, not projects. "Okay," he said finally. "Then that's what we'll do. You have my full support. If the tutor needs to be changed or the schedule, you tell me." The relief on her face was a physical thing. Her shoulders relaxed. "Thank you, sir. They are good children. They just need room to be good in their own way." He believed her. For the first time, he felt like he was finally getting a real report on his own family, and it wasn't about grades or milestones. It was about headaches and pillow forts and grass stains. It was the truest report he'd ever received as she left the room to check on the kids. He sat there in the fading afternoon light, thinking about the walls again. He wasn't just taking them down brick by brick. He was learning, for the first time, what to put in their place. A week passed. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale. There was still spilled juice, and a meltdown over mismatched socks, and one long night when a fever went through the house and Maria stayed up in a chair, dozing while keeping a cool cloth on a small forehead. But it was a different kind of life. The father found himself clearing his calendar more. He started leaving the office by 4, just to be there for the after-school noise. As he now thought of it, he didn't always know what to do, but he was learning to just be there. One afternoon, he came into the living room to find a truly spectacular mess. Every cushion from the sofas was on the floor. Blankets were draped over chairs. It looked like a fabric hurricane had hit the room. In the middle of it all was a fortress, a cave made of pillows and draped sheets. From inside, he could hear whispers and giggles. He walked over and crouched down by the entrance, a gap between 2 cushions. "Hello? Anyone home in there?" 3 faces immediately appeared at the entrance, their eyes shining in the dim cave light. "Daddy, you can't come in yet. It's not finished," his daughter said. "Yeah, it's a secret base. We need a password," his oldest added. Trying to sound serious, he played along. "What's the password?" They all looked at each other, then scrambled back inside. He heard frantic whispering. Then Maria's voice, soft and amused from inside the fort. "Maybe it's Sopa." The kids giggled. "Sopa!" they shouted in unison. "Sopa?" he repeated gravely, and crawled inside. The space was cozy, smelling like clean laundry and children. The kids were sprawled on pillows. Maria was sitting with her back against the sofa, a picture book open in her lap. A battery-powered lantern cast a warm glow. "See?" his youngest said, pointing at the roof of sheets. "No monsters can get us here. It's safe." His heart squeezed. He settled onto a cushion, feeling large and clumsy in their little world. "It's the safest place I've ever seen," he said. Maria smiled and went back to reading the story, her voice doing different characters. The children leaned against her, against each other, their breathing slowing. This was it, he thought. This was the thing money could never, ever build. This feeling of safety, of togetherness in a homemade cave. Later, after the children were in bed, he found Maria in the kitchen, preparing their lunchboxes for the next day. She was cutting sandwiches into shapes, stars and circles. "You don't have to do that," he said, leaning against the doorway. "Plain squares are fine." She didn't stop. "I know, but your daughter saw a picture of a star-shaped sandwich in an old book at school. She said it looked like magic. It takes 2 extra minutes." She shrugged, as if making a little magic was the most obvious thing in the world. That he was quiet for a moment. "They told me the fort was a safe place, to keep monsters out." She put the knife down and looked at him. Her expression was gentle but honest. "Children feel things, sir, even when they can't say it. A big, quiet house can feel large. Empty spaces can feel scary when you're small. A fort makes the world smaller, just the right size for them." He understood then that she wasn't just keeping them busy. She was healing something. She was filling the empty spaces he had left, not with things, but with presence, with safety, with star-shaped sandwiches. "The head nanny, Ms. Gable," he said. "She called today. Her family emergency is over. She's ready to come back." The air in the kitchen went still. Maria's hands paused over the lunchboxes. She didn't look at him, just nodded slowly. "She is very qualified, sir." He pushed off from the doorway and walked closer. "She is. But this house doesn't need more qualifications right now. It needs you." He took a breath. "I spoke with her. We've reached a settlement. She won't be returning." Maria finally looked up. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the truth in his words. "It's your job if you want it," he said, his voice simple and clear. "Not just while she's away. For good." For a second, she didn't move. Then her eyes welled up, and she quickly wiped them with the back of her wrist, nodding. I want it. Very much. Thank you, sir. Good, he said, feeling a rightness settle deep in his bones. He started to leave, then turned back. And Maria? The password to the fort. Sopa means soup, right? A real, full smile broke across her face, the kind that reached her eyes. Yes, sir. But for them, it doesn't just mean soup. It means the day they helped stir. It means being together. It's their word for home. He walked out of the kitchen, the word echoing in his mind. Home. It wasn't a place on a deed anymore. It was a fort made of pillows. It was a clapping game. It was a star-shaped sandwich and a woman who wasn't afraid to sit on the grass. For the first time in years, he was finally starting to learn its language. Time didn't change everything. He still had to travel sometimes. The world of billions of dollars still demanded his attention. But now, when he stood in a hotel room on the other side of the world, he didn't just see the empty silence. He'd call home, and the video screen would show a chaos of faces. He'd hear about the new game Maria taught them, or about the bug they found in the garden, or see a painting taped proudly to the wall behind them. The empty spaces in his own life were filling up, one small, real detail at a time, that he began to notice the changes, not just in the house, but in himself. One Saturday morning, he found himself in the kitchen not to get coffee, but because he heard a sound. Maria was showing the children how to make the dough for flatbreads, the kind she had eaten as a child. Flour was everywhere. On the counter, on the floor, on the tip of his son's nose. Can I help? He asked. Standing in the doorway, four faces turned to him, all surprised. The children cheered. Maria smiled and nodded. We need strong hands for kneading, she said as he rolled up his sleeves. The sleeves of a shirt that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and plunged his hands into the soft, sticky dough. His children giggled at the mess on his fingers. He showed them how to push and fold, his own movements clumsy at first. For a few minutes, there was no Billionaire and no Maid and no Triplets. There were just 5 people in a sunlit kitchen, up to their elbows in flour, laughing when the dough stuck to someone's hand, and he felt a simple, profound joy. It was the joy of creating something, not a business deal, but a moment, a memory. The bread, when they finally ate it later, warm and slightly lopsided, tasted better than any meal in any fancy restaurant he'd ever been to. That evening, after the children were asleep, he asked Maria to join him on the back patio. The sky was full of stars. For a while, they just sat in a comfortable silence, listening to the night insects. Thank you, he said finally, the words feeling too small for what he meant. For everything you've given them. You've given them a childhood. She looked out at the dark garden. They gave me something too, sir, she said softly. A family to care for. This house. It was just a beautiful shell before. Now it has a heartbeat. He knew exactly what she meant. The heartbeat was the thump of a soccer ball, the rhythm of a clapping game, the whisper giggles from a pillow fort. It was the sound of life, finally living here. He made a decision then, one that had nothing to do with business. I want you to know, he said, his voice firm. This is your home, for as long as you want it to be. Not just a job, a home. You are part of this family. She didn't cry this time. She just took a deep, steady breath and nodded, her eyes shining in the starlight. It is an honor. The story of the billionaire who came home unannounced didn't have a dramatic ending. There was no villain to defeat, no huge secret revealed. The real story was much quieter, and much more important. It was the story of a man who learned that the most precious things aren't built in boardrooms. They are built on kitchen floors, with flowery hands and patient hearts. It was the story of a woman whose simple human kindness was the rarest and most valuable thing any house, no matter how grand, could ever hold. And for the triplets, the story was simple. They didn't know about the surprise return or the big decision. All they knew was that one day, the quiet, smiling lady who cleaned the room sat down on the floor and taught them a game. And after that, the big house stopped feeling so big. Their father started coming home earlier, and his laugh sounded different, lighter. The days became filled with adventures and quiet moments, with soup that meant home and a fort that meant safety. The billionaire hadn't just halted at what the maid was doing that night. He had finally stopped his own frantic race long enough to see what truly mattered. And in doing so, he didn't just change her life, or his children's lives. He finally found his way home, and began the slow, beautiful work of building one, for real, from the inside out.